welcome back to the deep dive. If you're anything like us, you've probably felt it. That just sheer volume of information about AI hitting our workplaces. It's exciting, sure, but also kind of daunting.
Yeah, a bit overwhelming, right? Trying to sort through the noise and figure out what really matters for, your actual career, your skills.
Exactly. So that's why today we're doing a deep dive. We're pushing past the headlines with some, frankly, groundbreaking new research out of Stanford University.
hmm And this isn't just another opinion piece. It's a really rigorous, systematic look, an audit, really, of how these AI agents are actually impacting the U.S. workforce. And crucially, it's based on what the workers themselves are saying.
Right. So our mission here for you, our listener, is to unpack some pretty vital insights. We want to explore what workers actually want AI to do.
And how that lines up, or maybe doesn't, with what AI can currently do.
And, most importantly, what does all this mean for the skills you'll need? How do you get ahead of this curve instead of just, reacting?
Because, look, these AI agents, these systems that can handle complex multi-step tasks, they're advancing incredibly fast.
They really are.
But we haven't really had a clear picture, especially from the workers' point of view, of their impact. A lot of the research before was maybe too narrow or just focused on the company's bottom line.
Yeah, profitability, not necessarily worker desire.
Exactly. The Stanford study, though, it fills that gap. They actually did these mini interviews to capture the nuances of what people want or don't want.
And they built this amazing resource to do it, didn't they? Something called WORKBank.
That's right, WORKBank. Think of it like the government's OneNet database, but seriously supercharged for this AI question.
Supercharged how?
Well, they got direct input from 1,500 domain workers people actually in these jobs. And then they got capability ratings from 52 AI experts, looking at over 840 tasks across more than 100 different occupations. And the data is incredibly fresh, collected just this year between January and May 2025.
So, truly current. First large-scale audit of its kind, you said.
As far as we know, yes. It's really setting a new benchmark.
Okay, let's unpack this then. This deep dive feels like it's going to reveal some surprising stuff about what work with AI might actually look like. So, diving in, what's the first big, maybe unexpected finding?
Well, I think the headline finding right off the bat is how open workers actually are to AI automation. But, and this is a big but, with very specific conditions.
Okay, open how?
Yeah.
Because you hear so much about fear and job loss.
Right, and that's there too. We'll get to that. But for nearly half the tasks they looked at, about 46% workers actually had a positive attitude towards AI agents taking them over.
Almost half. That is surprising. So why? What's the motivation if it's not just getting rid of jobs?
That's the really fascinating part. In almost 70% of those positive cases, the reason given was to free up time for high-value work.
Okay, so it's not about replacement, it's about assistance.
Yeah.
Like getting rid of the boring stuff.
Exactly. It paints this picture of AI as a supportive assistant, freeing up humans to do the more complex, creative, or strategic parts of their jobs. It kind of flips that whole AI is coming for your job narrative on its head.
Yeah, it shifts it towards job enhancement, not just displacement. People want to offload the mundane, the repetitive, maybe even the stressful bits.
Which raises a really interesting design question, doesn't it? How do we build AI that truly elevates human potential, rather than just automating tasks away?
A powerful idea. But, okay, you mentioned there's another side. It wasn't all positive. Where did workers draw the line? What are the red light zones?
Absolutely. Understanding the resistance is crucial. So about 28% of the time, workers expressed negative feelings or fears about AI taking over a task.
And what drove those fears? Was job loss the biggest one there?
It was significant, but actually not the top concern. Number one, cited in 45% of negative responses, was a lack of trust, worrying about AI's accuracy, its reliability.
Okay, that makes sense. Can I actually trust this thing to do it right?
Precisely. Then came the fear of job replacement. That was about 23%. And then, at around 16%, was this concern about the absence of human qualities.
Ah, the human touch. Losing creative control, empathy, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Things AI, at least currently, struggles with. Losing the nuance, the artistry.
Does the research show if certain types of jobs felt this resistance more strongly?
Oh, definitely. The arts, designs, and media sector really stood out. Only about 17% of tasks in that area got a positive nod for automation. The human element is just non-negotiable there, it seems.
Yeah, I remember seeing some quotes from the study, an art director saying they wanted AI for workflow, but absolutely no content creation.
Right, and another one was even more blunt. I would never use AI to, like, replace artists.
And a graphic designer basically said, AI is great for research, finding ideas maybe, but I create my design by myself.
It draws a very clear line in the sand for creative work. Use AI as a tool, maybe an assistant, but not as the creator.
What's also really interesting here, though, is the disconnect you mentioned earlier between what workers say they want automated and what current AI tools, like the big language models, are actually being used for.
Yeah, that usage mismatch is striking. They looked at data from Claude.ai, for instance, the top 10 jobs where workers showed the highest desire for automation. They accounted for only like 1.26% of the actual usage of the tool.
Well, barely over 1%. That's a massive gap.
It really is, and it tells us something important. You can't just look at usage logs to understand what the workforce actually needs or wants from AI.
Right, because early adopters or specific industries might skew those logs. It doesn't capture the broader desire.
Exactly. It highlights why actually asking workers, like this study did, is so critical for anyone developing or investing in AI tools. You might be building something technically possible but fundamentally unwanted, or missing huge opportunities where workers are asking for help.
Okay, so asking workers is key. And the study went deeper than just yes or no to automation, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned a scale.
Yes, they introduced something they call the Human Agency Scale, or HS. HS. It moves beyond that simple automated, don't automate binary.
How does it work?
It's a scale from H1 to H5, quantifying how much human involvement workers actually desire for a given task when AI is involved. It helps frame the discussion around collaboration and augmentation.
So H1 would be fully autonomous.
Right. H1, AI handles it all. H2, AI does most, needs minimal human input. H3, this is the partnership level human and AI work together, achieving more than either could alone.
Okay, this synergy point.
Exactly. H4, AI needs significant human input to even succeed. And H5, AI basically can't function without continuous human direction and involvement.
And where did workers land on this scale generally? What level of agency did they want most?
This is fascinating. H3, that equal partnership level, was the dominant desired level for almost half the occupations they surveyed, 47 out of 104.
Again, nearly half. That's a strong signal. People don't just want to hand things over. They want to work with the AI, like a co-pilot.
Precisely. It really emphasizes this desire for human-AI teamwork. But there's a potential source of friction here, too, a really significant one.
Okay, what's that?
Well, the study compared worker desires with what AI experts think is technologically feasible right now. And for nearly half the tasks, 47.5% workers want more human involvement, a higher haste level, than the experts think is strictly necessary from a tech standpoint.
Ah, so workers are saying, I want to be the co-pilot, but the engineers might be building the plane to fly itself because technically it can.
That's a good analogy, yeah. There's a gap between desired agency and perceived technical capability. And if companies just deploy AI based on what's possible without considering what's desired, they could face real pushback. People might feel like their control or judgment is being overridden unnecessarily.
That's a critical point for implementation. So did the study look at which jobs fell at the extremes of this HAS scale? Like, where did experts see very little need for humans, H1?
They did. Experts saw roles like computer programmers, proofreaders, and, interestingly, travel agents as being predominantly H1, even now. Tasks that are often routine, data-driven, with outcomes that are relatively easy to check.
Makes sense. And on the other end, H5, where continuous human involvement is essential.
That was much rarer. Workers primarily wanted H5 for the role of editors. Experts, however, tagged mathematicians and aerospace engineers as needing H5 levels of human input.
Interesting divergence there between workers and experts on H5. What makes a task fundamentally H5? What's the key factor?
Well, for workers wanting H5, the primary driver was interpersonal communication, that human interaction piece.
Okay.
For the experts designating tasks as H5, it was both interpersonal communication and domain expertise, needing that deep specialized knowledge combined with human interaction.
We saw some quotes reflecting this, right? The editor being resistant, saying they check every AI grammar suggestion carefully.
Exactly. That embodies the H5 desire for control and judgment. And then there was that mathematician quote, which was quite profound.
The one saying AI is currently useless for their core work because it solves problems people give it, rather than coming up with genuinely new mathematical concepts.
Yes. That speaks volumes about the limits of current AI in truly original abstract thought, a key aspect of H5 domain expertise in that field.
So this whole HS scale, the worker desires, the expert views, it really shows AI integration isn't a simple on-off switch. It's more like a complex dance we're just learning the steps to.
That's a great way to put it, a dynamic partnership.
And this dance, naturally, is going to change the music, right? It has huge implications for the skills that will be most valuable going forward.
Absolutely. The economic implications are significant. As AI takes on certain tasks, the demand for the human skills needed for other tasks will shift.
And the study gave some clues about which skills might be rising or falling in demand.
It did. And it's quite interesting. Skills that are very common now in high-paying jobs, like analyzing data or information or updating and using relevant knowledge.
Yeah, core knowledge worker skills.
Right. Those skills were found to be less prominent in the tasks that workers designated as needing high human agency, the H4 and H5 tasks. The implication is demand for those might actually shrink as AI gets better at them.
Okay, so if those analytical skills become less uniquely human, what skills become more important in this high-agency human-AI collaboration future?
The study points strongly towards interpersonal and organizational skills. Things like establishing and maintaining relationships, guiding, directing, and motivating subordinates, training and teaching others.
So the soft skills, people skills, leadership, communication, empathy.
Essentially, yes. Skills centered on human interaction and collaboration. What's interesting is that these aren't always the highest paid skills today, but the study suggests their value could significantly increase as AI handles more of the technical or analytical load.
That's a really important signal for you, the listener. If you're thinking about learning or upskilling, focusing on adaptability and these human-centric abilities seems increasingly critical. It's less about just knowing information and more about working with information and people, often alongside AI.
Exactly. It emphasizes collaboration, critical thinking in the context of AI suggestions, and those core human relational skills.
Now, tying this all together, we have worker desires, we have AI capabilities, we have shifting skill demands.
Hmm?
How does the current landscape of AI investment and research actually line up with all this? Are we building the AI people want and need?
That's another area the study shed light on, and the findings are, well, mixed. They used Y Combinator companies, YC, the big startup accelerator, as a kind of proxy for where early-stage investment is going.
Okay, what did they find?
They found that a pretty large chunk, 41% of the AI-related YC companies they looked at, are focused on areas the study calls low-priority or automation red light zones, meaning areas where workers either don't particularly want automation or where AI capability is still low and the desire is low. So a lot of investment seems concentrated in places that might not align with the biggest worker needs or opportunities.
So investors might be chasing tech novelty rather than actual user demand, while the green light zones where workers actively want AI help are potentially being underserved.
That seems to be the implication. There are these green light tasks and also what they call R&D opportunity tasks, high desire, but current AI isn't quite there yet that seem relatively underinvested in compared to their potential. It suggests a significant market opportunity might be getting missed.
That's fascinating. What about academic research? Is it better aligned?
Somewhat better, yes. They looked at research papers from ArcFOMOM. AI agent research is more focused on that R&D opportunity zone, which is good news. Researchers are tackling the hard problems where workers see potential value.
But I sense a but.
The but is that this research is still very heavily concentrated in computer science and engineering domains. To really meet the needs identified across the whole workforce, research probably needs to broaden its scope, engaging more with other fields and occupations.
Right, so the research focus is maybe a bit too narrow, even if it's heading in a slightly better direction than the investment.
That's a fair summary, yeah. There's room for better alignment across the board, investment, research, and development with what workers are actually saying they need and want.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. We've covered a lot of ground from this Stanford study. We've seen workers are, maybe surprisingly, open to AI, but mainly for the mundane stuff, freeing them up for higher value work.
But they're protective of tasks needing creativity, judgment, that human touch, especially in fields like arts and media.
And we learned about the human agency scale, HS, showing this really strong preference for collaboration, that H3 sweet spot rather than full automation.
Right, and the potential friction where worker desire for control might clash with what experts deem technically feasible.
Which leads to the shift in skills. Less emphasis perhaps on pure data analysis, more on interpersonal, collaborative, guiding, teaching skills. The human-centric stuff.
And finally, the disconnect where current investment might not be fully aligned with the biggest opportunities defined by worker needs and desires.
So for you listening to this deep dive, what's the big takeaway? It feels like the future workplace isn't just about learning to use AI tools, but learning how to partner with them effectively.
I think that's exactly it. It's less about fearing replacement and more about understanding augmentation, recognizing where AI can take the load off and where your unique human skills, critical thinking, creativity, empathy, collaboration become even more valuable. It's about amplifying your strengths with AI as a partner.
A powerful way to frame it. So here's a final thought to leave you with, something to mull over. As AI continues to get smarter, more capable, how might your own ideal human agency scale shift for different tasks in your life or work?
And thinking even further out, what completely new roles or tasks, things we can't even imagine yet, might emerge from this deeper, more nuanced human AI collaboration? What does work look like when partnerships